Hi, welcome back to Therapy Unboxed with me, Lana Seiler. And today we are joined by Annie, who is our lovely yoga, massage, sound healing, meditation, on and on and on about all the yummy things that you do. Welcome.
Thank you, Lana. Thanks so much for having me.
Today we are unboxing all the ancillaries. So all of the extras, the special services that and practices that can be super helpful for our health and well-being. So I'm going to just talk for a tiny bit about that, and then we'll dive into questions and answers and all kinds of fun stuff. So when I say ancillary, I just want to define that a little bit. A lot of this podcast has been sort of clinical treatment stuff, right? So those are the services around the services that enhance a treatment experience in a treatment center, and they are things that we can do outside of a treatment environment that are almost always things that I include in people's continuing care plan, like find a yoga studio, keep doing your meditation practices. So I think it's really important to bring this up, talk about it, dive a little deeper into it. Again, I love doing this show because these are things that we talk about all the time. Everybody now knows about yoga. Everybody knows about meditation. Most people have like an idea about crystals and sound singing bowls and things. And sometimes we can just stop there. And I think it's nice to go a little deeper and talk to someone who knows a lot about this stuff, and you're that person. So one of the things that I think kind of wraps around any journey into bettering our mental health, our emotional health, our behavioral health is self-care.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, our goal my goal, I should say, as a therapist and a provider, is that the person I'm working with takes their health and well-being into their own hands and becomes their own advocate. And that is all about self-care. Mm-hmm. So I know here at APN, we both work at APN, we try to help people start that journey while they're with us, because it's going to be harder to go to a yoga studio or to find a meditation group or to download an app than it is to just walk downstairs to the yoga room. And I laugh with clients a lot, the ones who kind of have hesitation in doing that. They're like, I just forgot, or I couldn't get there. And I'm like, all you got to do is walk downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
It gets harder, to make time in the day. But yeah, so that's sort of my view on all this, is that it's quote unquote ancillary, but to me, it really feels integral. This encompasses quite a bit, right? We can talk about yoga, and we will talk about yoga. We'll talk about meditation. We'll talk about breath work, which could be an episode in and of itself, because there's so much different. There's so many different types of breath work, and there's so much around breath work, and I love it. And I also know that there are some contraindications and some barriers, and there's all that. Sound healing, singing bowls, and you're also a massage therapist, which also is a great conversation, which we could probably spend a lot of time on too, because touch is so healing. It's so critical, and it's so loaded sometimes. And massage is something that I've recommended to my patients who are trying to rediscover safety in touch.
Yeah. I find that a lot as well.
Why don't we start there?
Okay. So I did start doing energy healing before I started massage.
Okay.
Because back in the day, the energy wasn't mainstream. And we do that in our spa as well. Mm-hmm. So I really feel like massage, I really call it more body work, because it truly is therapy. We are therapists for the body and the connection with what anyone is going through. And here at APN, our clients are often in classes all day, and so it can be really heavy mentally and emotionally for them. So the massage doesn't only feel good, and it's essential for some physical things that can be going on. It helps to process through what's been going on in the day. Mm-hmm. So it's really essential to like it used to be really thought of as a luxury, and I'm so glad it's here because it is so powerful for people. It can work in conjunction with the talk therapy and things like that. And back to what you were saying about the, safe touch. I find that a lot. It's so important. And sometimes when we are in a trauma situation or an addiction situation, touch is one of the things that goes away. And, or it's been done in a way that creates more trauma. And so when it's just a truly nurturing, caring, motherly type of touch, it can bring such a degree of comfort that maybe they wouldn't get in their other therapies.
Yeah.
So I find it so powerful. It's such a privilege,
oh
honestly,
my gosh,
to do here.
Yeah, and I love so much that we have it, and respect so much massage therapists, because it's brave to do that work, because it can be so delicate, and because I really find it to be a big responsibility that you guys have to provide, non-sexual, safe, loving touch. It's like a nurturing touch where you can feel the difference. And you've worked on me, and you're incredible. And I've experienced it, and I've experienced the sound healing with it, which we'll get into in a minute, because that's totally cool too. But it's true. It's like there's an element of care and like a holding environment that goes into what you guys do for people. And I know there's an energy exchange too, and we can talk about that. But I want to clarify, when you say energy work, what do you mean?
Well, we are all made up of energy. We have an electromagnetic field, inside and outside of us. And so I specifically started with Reiki. I still do it, and it's on our menu actually, that I'm practicing Reiki, but it's over 25 years of my life, so it's morphed and changed. So it's really, I don't know, I'll say this and we'll see if we can keep it. For me, it's, I'll see how you guys think about this, but it's really a conversation that my soul has with the client's soul. And so it's it's deeper than intuitive. And so it can, so that's what I mean by energy work. I'll just stop there because I don't know what to say.
That's okay. That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's your experience of how you're doing it, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, and the term soul, I know what you mean. It can be kind of controversial to some people.
That's why I wasn't sure if I should say it.
But essentially, what we're kind of talking about here is like what is in us that is more than there's just this.
Yeah. We could say my intuition having a conversation with their intuition. And then we know
our energy
what to
body,
do.
my energy body, and your energy body.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah.
So talking about touch, I want to move into, well, first I like that you call it bodywork, because I agree. There's certainly a healing process that happens. And in therapy, like psychotherapy, we call a lot of what we do the work, group work, trauma work. And it's the same concept with body work. It is a process of healing. It is a piece of work that you do with people.
A lot of times as well, we do become listening therapists, if you will, because it's a different setting, and they do end up feeling safe pretty much 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And so they will share things with me that they either are processing from things they've shared with their talk therapist, with the processing groups, or process groups, or they'll have like a revelation. They're like, oh, this just clicked. So it's amazing. It's amazing.
Honestly, what it makes me think about is integration. So that's what's happening.
Yep.
Right. So they go through so much people go through so much during the day, and then they get to you and they are able to integrate. And I want to broaden this, because outside of a treatment environment, that same thing can happen.
Yep.
I mean, I know I've experienced it before in yoga classes. and I have funny stories about that, and we'll talk about it later. But in yoga classes and getting massage, good, where I feel safe, with someone that I've worked with before, it does feel kind of like integration, like whatever's happening in my life or in my day. It's almost like when you go to sleep and your brain is trying to integrate during, REM cycles and things, and we have dreams. It's sort of similar. Like you're like allowing your system, and I use the term system a lot because with trauma work, a lot of times I do parts work and things, so I want to like allow for multiplicity. Our system is doing what it needs to do in safe hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
I usually do a brief history, but I'm just going to say that we know yoga's ancient.
Okay.
It's been around for a long time.
I will say, I'll add this or say this.
Mm-hmm.
It is not only ancient, but it was designed, and I say this a lot to men who are like, it's a girl's thing, or they're really uncomfortable being in there. It was designed for soldiers facing battle, to strengthen the vessel and to find tools to soothe and calm the mind when they're doing devastating things, much like living a life on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really, women weren't allowed to do it for
wild.
Oh, I know, it's crazy, for a long time.
And then we took it over.
And then we took, as you do, as you do. But so it is. It's not only ancient, but it was really designed for life and the twists and turns and the traumas and the devastations and the joys and the celebrations, because that can also be a traumatic experience for certain people. So it's a way to navigate all of that. And all of the asana, the mantra sound, the mudra, hand gestures or full body gestures, and the breath work, the prana, those are tools that we learn in yoga and that you can use then in your world. And talking about the clients taking these home, the mudras, like this is one of my favorites, Abhya Hridaya, Fearless Heart Mudra. And that helps us have courage to face what we are facing or what we will be facing. So, and they change us physiologically. And we talked about yoga being a science, and this is part of that. The gestures we make and the sounds we make, the vibrations.
Absolutely, with the science piece, and we were just talking before we started the show, how I often am like, because I've mentioned this in a previous show, but I'll say it today too. I started my journey as a yoga teacher. Mm-hmm. I started teaching yoga before I became a therapist, and that was what kind of brought me into therapy, was watching these incredible cathartic experiences happening in yoga class, and I'm like, sold.
Right.
this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And so I took it to the clinical route, which ended up being much less cathartic than teaching yoga.
I'm sure.
Another story for another day. I internally kind of crack up because we like these bodies of research come out and they put electrodes on monks' heads, and we do all these like scientific experiments and things to see what's actually happening, and time after time it ends up being like, well, yep, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yep, it's doing what people have said it does. Meditation, changes our brain. Yeah. Yoga strengthens our vessel. Mm-hmm. And when I say that, I mean more than just the body, right? We mean our ability to tolerate discomfort. Mm-hmm. And distress tolerance is a big piece of therapy, and behavioral health and mental health is learning how to be in the world. 12-step terminology would be life on life's terms.
Yeah. And
I often say that life shows up like chair pose. As soon as you get in it, you want to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's big. Those are big concepts, and that's big work.
Yeah. And lifelong, again, I go back to taking the tools out. And I do hear that from the students here, that they are, sometimes I know people in the towns they live in, because the yoga community, as vast as it has become, it's just still small. Mm-hmm. We know each other. And I've even seen them doing the mantras and the mudras on site, out in in the community.
That's really beautiful.
I love it.
To see it happen organically and unplanned, and to know that people are really taking hold of this stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the practice for you, your journey into the practice and teaching, and style that you teach or styles that you connect with.
Okay, so for me, first and foremost, yoga is not an exercise class. It really is a journey of discovery of self, how we are in certain poses. Like, as a teacher, I can tell a lot about a student just by the way they practice, their resistance, like type A, I don't mean to say it like that, but you can tell.
Yeah, the ones that are not going to get out of that pose until you say it's done, even if they're going to fall to the floor.
Anyway, so it's not exercise. And I came to yoga, I was going through a divorce, and I had an infant and a toddler. And I just needed something to support myself with. So that's what I went to yoga for. I didn't go for the physical. And I had my first year of practicing yoga was on Channel 17 watching this lady teach yoga. And she made it look so easy. And when I went to yoga class, I was sore in places I didn't even know I had places. I was just like, oh my God, I could not pick up my baby. But I was hooked. I loved it because it started to make me feel strong physically as well as strong of spirit. And I was scared, I was going to be alone with 2 small children. And so it really empowered me to take on this new life that I was going to be having. And being a new mother is scary enough. And so anyway, so that's why I came to yoga. And I was hooked. And I started teaching about a year after that. And there were not a lot of yoga teachers here. It was not like it is now. And my teacher, I was a good student and I was diligent, and so she had asked me to start teaching for her. So that's my foray, and I haven't stopped. And it's been about 25 years.
And here in the Vail Valley, you're talking
here
about?
In the Vail Valley. I've studied all over, and I'm considered an international teacher because I taught for 3 years in England. So and that's different, so different. Just the approach and the way that they experience yoga in that country.
And what about different styles?
I came to yoga in an Iyengar-based practice, Anusara yoga, which is now defunct. And now I am studying in it. It's my latest certification to come. I just haven't signed the paper. It's Rasa Yoga, R-A-S-A. And Rasa is in the Tantrika philosophy, which is more of a householder's style of yoga, where it is something you don't have to meditate to transcend. It's for people who are mothers and workers, and and it's ancient. It's also traditional. It's just a little bit different than the classical yoga style. So that's what I teach. And the Rasa at the Tantrika philosophy says yes to life, yes to everything, yes to our shadow side, yes to the parts of ourselves we're proud of. We bring it all together. And a rasa is an emotion, a feeling, a spice, a flavor. It's, as I'm sure you know, but that almost every Sanskrit word has 108 or more meanings. So rasa can be a lot, but like one of my favorites is karuna, and that's compassion. That's a rasa. Love is a rasa. Disgust is a rasa.
So it's kind of like being on earth, like being in our human experience.
Absolutely, yes, exactly. It's because some of the yoga philosophies do train people that you have to transcend this earth. Right. To be one with yourself this is
and
others. And
we're going to do that here on the planet.
Do it while you're embodied.
In this messiness that we are
and we welcome the messiness. That's all part of it. It's like, say yes to the messy side. And thank goodness, in my life. But so that's where I come from. But I have studied a lot of different styles, so that's also kind of morphed into how I teach now.
Yeah.
But the one I adhere to the most is this Rasa community.
Let's bring in a little bit about the nervous system, because what I have learned just from reading, I mean, I'm a big Van der Kolk fan, and he's like a huge yoga fan. So it really fit, because I came to this through yoga, and then I started reading about trauma work and all that. And I was like, man, this is all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned a lot in reading about it. And one of the things that really stood out to me that I talk about a lot, and I'd like to hear from you about, is our nervous system it gets out of whack when we experience chronic stress, when we experience intense stress. We get stuck in like sort of a fight or flight, freeze, fawn, flop. There's a million of them. Trauma responses that our bodies become accustomed to being in.
Yeah.
And yoga is one of the only things, if not the only thing, that actually helps our nervous system rebalance.
Yeah.
Because, and here's where I'm going to see if this is right or not, because I'm not 100% sure. My understanding is that because not only are you strengthening your ability to tolerate discomfort in asanas that are uncomfortable and challenging, but also our nervous systems go through small activation and deactivation. So sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic, as we're moving through a sequence. So like back bend, chest opening, and I've experienced this myself, and like having like major cathartic sobbing breakthroughs in camel pose, right, with your chest and your heart open, causes a little bit of like activation.
Yeah.
And then a forward fold or something more like contained helps parasympathetic come back online. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes, exactly right. Well, there's always, shifts and changes, but yeah, for the most part, the vulnerable shapes, the back bend you talk about, like you talked about, your heart's open. It's really the belly. Like in nature, that's what animals will protect at all costs. So that's a very can be a frightening place to be for the nervous system. And forward folds they calm you right down. And I love yoga because it's almost as if we have discovered through ourselves what will work. Like if you think about when you are just like in despair, what do most people do? They fold forward and they cover their face, but you fold forward. So the body knows that that's going to help. And so we've just, but the practice of yoga has really refined that to do that within a class. Yes. So then it balances those two as well. So, and then this is me. This is not anything I've read, but so I feel like, so when we get practice coming out of that fight or flight regularly, we are more able to put that to use when we are experiencing it in the real world.
Oh, yeah.
Not just on the mat.
Oh, yeah.
And then like some of my favorite breaths, there are some of my, and I love the mudras, but there's so many mudras that also will bring you into the parasympathetic nervous system place. And the breath work, like my favorite is, in Sanskrit we say samavriti. It's same fluctuation, same flow. And I think I've heard it in the Western world. It's a little bit differently presented, but box breathing. And that, I used that when I had a deep trauma in my life, just so I could function minute to minute. So for probably a year, I practiced that on the daily.
Yeah.
And and triage, there's one way. When it's like, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack, an anxiety attack. There's a very short version. And then when you're just able to have the time and the wherewithal to practice it for the purpose of calming the nervous system, there's a longer version.
Yeah. Another thing I'm hearing when you're describing this is that the uses are very depending on the circumstance. And I'll also often talk to people about just like anything else, you want to be in practice so that when the thing happens, you're not like picking up the tool for the first time.
Exactly.
So practicing these breaths and the movements, mudras, and meditation practices, whatever the tools are that we want to have in our toolbox, using them daily, a couple times a week, however often we can, so that we have some comfort level. So when we are having a panic attack, or when we are faced with something incredibly challenging, it feels familiar.
Yes. And too, it's like almost like when you were saying like picking up the tool for the first time. So it's this very rudimentary tool that you really don't know how to access or use. And then you start to get the, the refined, the honed, the precise parts of the tools. So yeah, and yoga is meant to be, and I think in one of the Yoga Sutras, it's one of the descriptions is, I can't remember how it's said, but basically yoga is meant to be practiced consistently for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Ideally a lifetime.
Yeah.
And that is because I think about that, like, no matter the childhood we had, we've all got some childhood trauma. No matter how great our life is going, there's always something that's going to break our heart or cause us despair. And then when something does, like you were saying, when something really shatters everything about you, I had an experience like that, and I just thank God for yoga. I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for the practices that I had taken the time to learn and study.
Right.
When I didn't know what can happen in a life.
Yeah, like life-saving stuff.
Yeah. So they really are, and I will. So many of the clients here and the students here, they have come back to me and said, I used that breath, or I used that mudra, and it really did. Like, I felt it. So you can get benefits from yoga on a one-time situation, but that consistency and that dedication, if you will, it does make a big difference. Just like in anything you practice, you're going to get really adept at it and understand it more deeply.
And we often, and without even realizing it, probably end up practicing things that aren't as helpful. And so our brains get really good at those things, and then we have to try to turn it and like practice something that is more helpful. So a lot of times what I'll do is validate, and this I think is helpful for people in any walk of life that might be listening, is that there are things that we can use to regulate that are very helpful in the short term, but over the long term, they decrease in their efficacy and helpfulness, and they often will become their own problem, such as drugs and alcohol, reckless sex, reckless behavior, adrenaline junkies, all these different things, right? Food, could go on and on. And then there are things that we use that take a little while to become as helpful, but over the long term, they are an investment.
Huge.
In our health and wellness.
Yes.
And I say that a lot of times to validate for people, because they come in to treatment, or they're not in a treatment environment, but in some kind of like heightened experience of like struggle. And they're like, you want me to breathe? Like, I'm supposed to journal right now, like, are you out of your mind? And I validate that that's how it sounds in the beginning, right? Like, you want me to go to yoga class? I just experienced da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, yes. Yeah. Yes. And it's about tolerating, right? You may have a great experience right away, but you may not. It may take a little bit of time. It may feel uncomfortable, and it may make you feel worse sometimes in the beginning. I know for me, and then I'll stop because you're supposed to be talking about this. I get so excited. That's good. I know for me, like when I'm out of practice, like right now, because I haven't been to yoga in like probably a year and a half, 2 years, there's like a, I don't know if it's a reprimand that my body gives me, but there's some like, you haven't been doing this, and there's that like, I know this isn't going to feel great. it'll feel okay. Like you know, when you work out and you're like, oh, well, at least I did something healthy, but it doesn't feel great when I get back to it in the beginning, because I'm sore and I'm stiff, and I'm less patient. Imagine that, you know, when I'm not in my practice.
Right.
So there's that like validation that it's a journey, just like anything else. In the beginning can be a little rough.
Yes. And even not just the beginning, like as your practice changes and your life is changing and ebbing, you can have what are seeming setbacks or something that derails it, even when you're practicing. And I will just say, I want to jump back to when you were talking about some of the telling your patients to come to yoga or to go to yoga. I think how I am as a person and a teacher, and also how the philosophy of the yoga that I study and practice, we meet you right where you are, you know, and people are getting to understand that here, at least, that if there's a day they just need to lay on their mat and just absorb and listen, that's what you do. I had broken my foot 3 years ago, and I needed yoga, but I also didn't want to be around people. So I was actually really glad when everything went Zoom. I was like, oh, thank goodness. You know, I've got my Harry Potter invisibility cloak. But I practiced yoga with a broken foot, and it like helps to train your ego to be okay with not being who you were. And, you know, balancing for probably a year and a half after that, I was just like, what? I'm like a beginner.
Yeah.
And that, so even in the struggles in it, it was such a valuable growth experience for me of letting go of that need, you know, because I'm like, oh God, they all know I'm a teacher in here and I can't even stand, you know, but it's like it mattered to some degree because it triggered me a little bit, but it doesn't matter. Like we are perfect during our growth. We are perfect when we come up against a growth edge and we don't know what to do. And that is what, for me, yoga reminds me and teaches me and solidifies.
We were talking about vibration, and I know there's a lot of different ways to get vibration. There's like chanting things that you can do, and there's also vibration we can get through. And you've worked on me with the singing bowls in massage sessions. So tell me a bit about vibration, sound, healing work.
Okay, so the body and the brain understand sound and vibration. So even if you're not sure what is ailing you on that particular day, your body does, your brain does, even if it's not coming to the forefront of your consciousness. So you can use the sound in that way. One of my favorite things about the sound healing class that I teach here, beyond the putting it on the body and the massage, is it's very interactive, and there's a demonstration of water in the bowl, and then when you sound the bowl by singing it around the edges or gonging it, the water changes shape and it changes pattern, and depending on how you hit it, it will be, sometimes it's just like when you drop a pebble in the ocean or in the lake, it just is those ripples that go right to the center, right to the core. And I have to say that has been the most astounding things for people to see here, because we are, as human beings, made up of mostly water. And when we practice yoga, when we meditate, when we get massage, that is a little bit more tactile, so you do feel the difference. But with the other things, sometimes they don't really notice a change or a difference. And when they can see that visual of that's what's happening, and that's what's happening when someone hurts your feelings. That's wild. That's what's happening when someone praises you. You know, the cells are different, but it affects us. So that is my favorite thing right now about the singing bowls, is the illustration that we can show people. This is what's happening when you think nothing's happening.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about breath.
Okay.
Breath is a huge tool I've used it. That's something that I am still using in my practice is different types of breath work, box breathing, like you mentioned. Talk to me a little bit more about breath work.
So breath is like each and every one of us, from the second we came into existence on Earth, we have been breathing. But we've never really, I was never taught how to breathe in school. I was never taught how to breathe until I started practicing yoga in my 30s. And so when we can, it's already powerful. It's already a life-giving thing. But when we can consciously understand the breath, dance with the breath, gain fluency with the breath, we are in a better place to heal physically, to heal emotionally, to process our lives, to gain clarity. It's all of those things. And there's, so one of my favorite right now, and I go through phases, where I love this one for a while, or I'm using this one as a tool for a while. But right now, one of my favorites is called Bastrika, and it translates to the bellows, like a bellows that you would stoke a fire. So just along those lines, it stokes the fire of any endeavor that we are, all I can think of is saying endeavoring. So it stokes the fire of anything that we're moving through or trying to understand. It just gives us that little impetus.
Mm-hmm.
It is considered a fire breath, so it's a fire, but it's not that burning, blazing. Mm-hmm. It's just a little ember that's just starting something. So it's quite gentle in its powerful appearance.
One thing I love about breath is we can use that for both upregulation and downregulation. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, when they think about self-regulation, we're automatically thinking, I need to calm down. And that is true a lot of time, but it's not always true. There's also upregulating when we're feeling dissociative or too contained. Mm-hmm. And that happens a lot with the freeze response, trauma response, and inhibition. And in those cases, we need something to kind of help us lift, to help us get some energy, get some fire.
Yep. And that's a perfect breath for that. And it's a more gentle way to do that. And it also clears the way. If you think of that bellows, it's blowing the dust away. It brings clarity of mind so that you can, regulate.
Mm-hmm. So, and we don't, and again, we could do a whole episode on this. Mm-hmm. There's also breathwork that's like holotropic breathwork, which is a little bit more cathartic in nature. It's designed to create these like very powerful experiences. Oftentimes music is involved, and it's sort of like the session that you do. And the ins and outs of how that works, I'm not exactly sure, except I know it floods your body with oxygen in a way. So there's that. And then there are these more like, I guess you would say like safer, calmer breath practices. Do you have any thoughts on the sort of more cathartic breath practices?
You mean
like holotropic breathwork, like breathwork experiences where you go and have those like where you're like rapid breathing and they're playing music, and a lot of people report like having visions.
I was working with a Kundalini teacher, and so I experienced that there, and it can sometimes be a little nauseating. Yeah. So it's quite interesting.
It is.
I don't have a lot of experience with that. But something you said made me think about another breath that is it's a great go-to, if you will. And there's different versions of it, but alternate nostril breathing, Nadi Shodhana, and that purifies the system. Nadi is an energy channel in the body, and Shodhana means to purify, to cleanse. And what I love about that is that it balances the left and right hemispheres of your body, as well as the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So it can be both uplifting and calming, depending on what your need is. So that's a great versatile one. It's good to do first thing in the morning. It's great to do at the end of the day.
Wow,
so
interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just want to like grab a couple takeaways, just because we've covered a lot today. in a kind of short period of time. And who knows, maybe we'll do another episode. I'm always like, every time I do an episode, I'm like, there's so much more to talk about.
So much more.
Well, but for today, I'm thinking takeaways are, this is an integral part. These sort of like, and whatever it is that people resonate with. I'm not saying people have to do yoga.
Right.
But whatever it is that people resonate with, like these ritual practices, these self-care practices are kind of the arms that, I imagine it as like the arms that like kind of hold a healing journey.
Yeah. It's this great support, and it's like a blanket.
Yeah. And self-care sometimes is tough,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes that holding means I've got to cut someone out of my life, or I've got to get up every day and do this thing I don't want to do right now. You know, sometimes it's tough, but it's one of the best things we can do for ourselves. And also I'm thinking like, it might be intimidating for people who have never done anything like this before. I want to say, you know, walking into a yoga class is probably one of the safest places you can walk into.
Yeah.
It's probably not true for every single class out there, but my whole experience in yoga is I've never walked into a class and been like, this doesn't feel safe. Actually, I take that back. There are times where it's very much like a athletic.
Yes.
So like maybe in a gym or something. And I know great yoga teachers who teach at gyms too. But sometimes there is that like kind of, I don't know if it's like a performance sort of oriented or whatever, or athletic oriented yoga that kind of pulls a little bit away from that self-care piece into like pushing your body to do things. But most of the time, and if you find a studio that's, you know, reputable and a studio that's like really into the whole experience of it, it's probably not going to have that feel, and very safe and very welcoming, and all abilities and all ages.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All sizes.
All sizes.
Genders, everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Totally welcoming, inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So don't be afraid.
Yes. Don't be afraid. And that is so true. And I do think of, and I've taught in a gym. Mm-hmm. I still teach the way I teach, mm-hmm. but yoga has gotten a little bit more where it's a workout mm-hmm. and things like that. And for me, I am a purist. That's not really yoga. It's an exercise class with some yoga poses. Mm-hmm. But even in that, mm-hmm. it's such a powerful practice. Mm-hmm. It's still going to bleed in mm-hmm. to that, the true nature of yoga. Yeah. So even those are still, it's still a safe space,
yeah.
you know, to enter.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really enlightening and fun to talk about. I don't get to talk about this stuff all the time. It brings me back to my roots. Yeah. But hopefully we can do it again.
I hope so, because there's so much.
I know.
But no, this was great fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Therapy Unboxed with me, Lana, and our lovely guest, Annie. Thank you again so much for being on.
Thank you so much, Lana. This was, I loved it.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to email us at pod@apnlodge.com. That's pod@apnlodge.com. And also we have information on our website, apn.com/podcasts. Feel free to share, like, subscribe, drop a note, and thanks again, guys.